Have you ever noticed your fear getting louder in a room that feels cold and gray, even when nothing obviously bad is happening? And have you ever stepped into warm light or soft color and suddenly felt your breath loosen, as if your body remembered safety before your mind did? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are exploring color therapy as a doorway into something bigger than aesthetics. Not magic, not superstition, a practical way to work with the nervous system, the mind, and the emotional, whether we call fear and anxiety. The first idea is this: anxiety is often a storm of signals inside the body, and the body responds to environment faster than it responds to logic. The second idea is this: karma is not only what happens to you. Karma is what you repeatedly practice when fear appears. If you practice panic, panic becomes your default. If you practice regulation, clarity, and compassion, your destiny slowly changes from the inside out. Let me tell you a story about someone who thought calm was something other people were born with. Her name was Sierra. Sierra looked functional from the outside. She got good grades. She replied to messages. She showed up to obligations. She was polite in conversations. She even smiled easily when people spoke to her. But inside she lived with a constant hum, like a low alarm that never fully shut off. Sometimes it rose into full anxiety, tight chest, shallow breath, restless hands, a mind that would not stop building worst-case futures. She tried everything that sounded respectable: productivity systems, self-help podcasts, strict routines. She even tried to force positivity. But forcing positivity was like painting over mold. The surface looked brighter, but the smell stayed. The fear did not disappear. It just learned to hide under performance. One afternoon, she walked into a small clinic waiting room. She did not go there for color therapy. She was there for something else entirely. But what happened in that room became a turning point. The waiting room was simple, not fancy, but the lighting was soft, and the walls were painted in a gentle shade that felt warm without being loud. There was a small plant near the window and a framed print of an ocean horizon. Nothing dramatic, yet Sierra felt her body change in a way she did not expect. Her shoulders lowered slightly, her jaw unclenched. Her breath deepened as if her lungs finally got permission to use their full capacity. She sat down and looked around, almost suspicious. How is this working on me? She thought. She did not want to admit it, but she had been living in visual stress for years. Bright screens, harsh lighting, gray commutes, clutter, endless scrolling that bombarded her attention with urgency and comparison. Her nervous system was not only reacting to life events, it was reacting to a constant environment of overstimulation and threat cues. Then a nurse called her name and led her down a hallway. The hallway had a few colored panels on the wall. Again, not decorative in a luxury way, more like intentional calm. The nurse noticed Sierra staring and said, "We keep the colors gentle here. It helps people settle." Sierra laughed awkwardly and said, "Colors help people settle?" The nurse nodded like it was obvious. The nurse said, "The eyes feed the nervous system. The nervous system feeds the mind. When the body settles, the mind has a chance to think clearly." That sentence stayed with Sierra all day. The eyes feed the nervous system. It sounded simple, almost too simple, but simple is often where wisdom hides. That night, Sierra went home and noticed her room for the first time in a long time. Not as a place she slept, but as an environment. She was training her nervous system inside. The overhead light white was harsh. The walls felt cold. The curtains blocked most daylight. Her desk was cluttered with half-finished tasks. Her phone screen was the brightest object in the room. It was like living inside a permanent alert. She sat on her bed and asked a quiet question. If my room is constantly telling my body to brace, how can I expect my mind to relax? This is where color therapy becomes more than a trend. It becomes a form of mind training through environment. Not because color alone cures anxiety, but because color can become one of the levers you use to shift state. State is everything. When you are anxious, your state narrows your attention. It makes you interpret neutral events as threats. It makes you impatient. It makes you reactive. It makes you cling to control. Then you create more conflict and more exhaustion. That is karma in motion. When you are regulated, your state widens attention. It makes you curious. It makes you patient. It makes you capable of compassionate choices. Then you create more stability. That is also karma. Sierra decided to experiment for 1 week, not like a believer, like a scientist. The first thing she changed was light. She replaced harsh brightness with softer lighting. She opened the curtains in the morning instead of immediately grabbing her phone. Daylight hit the room and changed the mood before her thoughts even started their usual sprint. Then she added one color element that felt calming to her. Not because someone told her a specific color was magic, because her body responded to it. She chose a gentle blue tone in a small blanketin, a simple object on her desk that reminded her of water. The first morning, she noticed something strange. Her mind still had anxious thoughts, but her body did not escalate as quickly. The thoughts were like sparks, but the room was not gasoline. That is an important distinction. Many people believe anxiety is only in their thoughts, but the body is the amplifier. If the body is already braced, every thought feels like danger. If the body is less braced, you can watch thoughts without being dragged. This is exactly what spiritual practice has been teaching for centuries. In meditation, you are not trying to delete thoughts. You are learning to relate to thoughts differently. Color therapy can support that by making the body slightly more willing to settle. Sierra started pairing color with breath. Each time anxiety rose, she would look at the calming object for a few seconds and take one slow breath, not to force calm, just to send a signal to the nervous system. We are here. We are safe enough in this moment. We can breathe. She did this in tiny moments. Before opening email, before a difficult conversation, before sleep, before stepping outside. Over time, those tiny breaths became a new reflex. That is how karma changes, not through one heroic day, through small repeated choices. Now let me tell you what happened on day 3, because this is where the story gets real. Sierra had a stressful meeting. Before the meeting, she felt the familiar rush, hot face, fast thoughts, a desire to either impress everyone or escape the room. She sat at her desk and did something simple. She turned her screen brightness down slightly. She placed the calming blue object in her line of sight. She took 3 slow breaths. She did not try to convince herself everything would be perfect. She simply regulated. Then she entered the meeting. The meeting was still challenging. People still questioned her. The pressure was still real, but her response changed. She paused before answering. She listened more carefully. She spoke with less defensive edge. She did not spiral after one awkward moment. When she made a small mistake, she corrected it calmly instead of collapsing into shame. After the meeting, she realized something. The meeting did not change. I changed. That is the heart of any healing practice. You stop waiting for the world to become gentle before you become gentle inside. This is where Buddhism and wisdom traditions connect perfectly with a topic like color therapy. The external world will always shift. People will always be unpredictable. Outcomes will never be fully controllable. If your peace depends on external perfection, you will never rest. But if your peace depends on training your inner state, you can meet impermanence without drowning. In Buddhist language, fear often arises from clinging to certainty, clinging to control, clinging to being liked, clinging to never being wrong. The mind says, if I can secure these conditions, I will be safe. But life does not offer permanent insecurity in conditions. It offers practice. So the practice becomes this. See clearly what is happening inside you. Regulate the body enough to think. Choose wise action. Release what you cannot control. Repeat. Color therapy is not the whole path. It is one small support for step 2. Now let me deepen it with another story. Because sometimes people misunderstand and think this is only about decorating a room. A man named Jonah worked night shifts in a place with harsh fluorescent lighting. He had anxiety that spiked after work. He thought it was purely psychological, but his body was living in a visual environment that signaled stress. Bright, cold light late at night can confuse the nervous system. It can keep the body alert when it needs to wind down. Jonah began doing something simple when he got home. He created a transition zone, a small corner with softer light and a warm color tone that felt like evening. He would sit there for 10 minutes. No phone, just breathing. He treated it like a bridge between work and rest. His sleep improved. His irritability reduced. His anxiety episodes decreased. Not because color cured him, because he changed the conditions that were constantly triggering him. This is wisdom, not fantasy. Practical cause and effect. Karma is cause and effect. If the environment constantly triggers stress, stress becomes your habit. If the environment supports regulation, regulation becomes more available. Now let us talk about fear and anxiety directly. Because color therapy only matters if it supports what you are actually facing. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is a protective signal. It tries to keep you alive. The problem is that fear often becomes overtrained. It starts seeing threats everywhere. It starts reacting to memories like they are present danger. It starts interpreting uncertainty as catastrophe. When fear is overtrained, it becomes anxiety. Anxiety is fear without a clear target. It is the body preparing for something without knowing what. So what helps anxiety is not only reassurance. Anxiety needs regulation and clarity. Regulation helps your body stop escalating. Clarity helps your mind stop catastrophizing. Compassion helps you stop shaming yourself for being human. Color can support regulation because vision is one of the fastest sensory pathways into state. When you look at something that your body associates with calm, your breath often follows. But the deeper practice is to make color a cue for awakening. Every time you see the calming color or light, let it remind you to return. Return to breath. Return to the body. Return to the present moment. Return to compassion. Return to wise action. In other words, make color a bell. In Buddhism, a bell is a reminder to wake up. Your phone can be a bell too, but it often becomes a bell of panic. Notifications train urgency. Color therapy can become a bell of steadiness. Sarah began doing this in public spaces too. When she felt anxiety rise on the train, she would look for a calming visual anchor. A patch of sky, a tree, a piece of clothing in a soothing tone, even a simple object in her bag. She would not stare dramatically. She would just soften her gaze for a moment and breathe. Her mind still had worries, But the worries did not always become a full storm. This is not perfection. This is practice. Now I want to speak to you directly, because some of you listening might be dealing with real anxiety that affects school, work, sleep, and relationships. If your anxiety is intense or persistent, professional support can be important. Therapy, medical advice, and community support can be part of wisdom. Wisdom is not trying to be tough alone. Wisdom is using help skillfully. But even with support, daily practice matters. Daily practice is where destiny changes. Color therapy can become one of your daily practices if you use it thoughtfully, not as superstition, as structure. Here is how Sarah used it without becoming obsessive. She did not chase perfect aesthetics. She did not buy a bunch of expensive things. She chose a few simple adjustments and treated them as reminders. Soft light in the evening, natural light in the morning, a calming color object near her workspace, a short breathing pause when she noticed the color, a gentle boundary around screen brightness at night. Then she paired it with inner training. She practiced naming emotions. Fear is here, tension is here, rush is here, shame is here. Then she returned to breath. This naming is powerful because it stops the emotion from becoming identity. Instead of saying I am anxious, you say anxiety is here. That difference is awakening. It creates space, and space is freedom. Over time, Sarah noticed another shift. Her relationship with herself softened. She stopped treating anxiety like a personal failure. She started treating it like weather. Sometimes the sky is stormy. You do not hate the sky. You prepare. You shelter. You breathe. You wait. You act wisely. This is compassion. Compassion is not indulgence. Compassion is the refusal to add cruelty to pain. Now let me share the part of the story that created the deepest change for her. One night she was lying in bed and the familiar anxiety tried to rise. The mind started listing future worries, money, relationships, health, mistakes, time. The mind is creative when it is scared. She reached for her phone out of habit. Then she stopped. She turned on the soft light instead. She looked at the gentle colored tome in her room. She put one hand on her chest and whispered, I will stay with you. That sentence sounds small, but it is a vow. When you tell yourself, I will stay with you, you stop abandoning yourself. And that is the deepest therapy, because anxiety often gets worse when you fight it or shame it. Fighting anxiety is like fighting a wave. You waste energy and still get wet. But when you meet anxiety with steady presence, the wave often passes faster. Sarah breathed slowly. The anxiety peaked. Then it softened. She fell asleep. The next morning, she realized she had done something she had not done in years. She had cared for herself without running away. That is awakening. That is wisdom. That is karma shifting. Now I want to widen the lens one more time. Why does this matter spiritually? Because fear shapes character. When fear runs your life, you become controlling. You become avoidant. You become reactive. You become harsh with yourself and others. You start seeing enemies everywhere. You start confusing discomfort with danger. You start shrinking your life to avoid triggers. That is a kind of suffering that looks like safety, but is actually a cage. When you learn to regulate fear, your world expands. You take healthy risks. You speak more honestly. You set boundaries without violence. You can love without clinging. You can work without constant panic. You can rest without guilt. This is the kind of freedom every wisdom tradition points toward. Not the freedom of having zero problems, the freedom of having a trained mind. Color therapy can be one small doorway into that training because it teaches a simple truth. Your environment is part of your practice. Your senses shape your state. Your state shapes your speech. Your speech shapes your relationships. Your relationships shape your destiny. So if you want to change your destiny, do not ignore the small things. A small shift in light, a small shift in color, a small shift in breath, a small shift in self-talk, a small shift in kindness. Small shifts compound. This is how people quietly become strong. Now I want to close with reflection and resonance, because I want this to land in your life, not only in your mind. Maybe you have been living in harshness for so long that your body forgot softness was possible. Harsh lighting, harsh schedules, harsh inner voice, harsh expectations. If so, try one gentle change today, not to fix everything, just to tell your nervous system, we are allowed to soften. And if you feel guilty for softening, notice that guilt. Guilt is often a sign you equate suffering with worthiness. That belief is common and it is painful. Worthiness is not earned through tension. Worthiness is inherent. Practice is how you remember. I have seen people who thought their anxiety was permanent start to shift when they stopped treating calm as something they did not deserve. When they allowed small soothing cues into daily life, their nervous system began trusting again. Trust is slow, but it grows. I have also seen people become obsessed with hacks. They tried every trick, but avoided the deeper practice of meeting their feelings. The lesson is balance. Use supports like color and light, but do not skip the inner work. The inner work is compassion, awareness, and wise action. Thank you for being here with me today. Now I want you to share your experience in the comments. What color or kind of light makes your body feel calmer? And what is one small way you can use it as a reminder to breathe and return when anxiety rises? If you want more long-form storytelling that blends practical mind training with awakening, wisdom, karma, compassion, practice, and the quiet ways we reshape destiny, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment so this community can grow. If membership support is available and it fits your situation, it helps keep these deeper conversations alive. Until next time, may your eyes find calm, may your breath follow, and may your mind learn that peace is not a prize you earn, but a practice you return to.